The gospel is the best news in the history of creation. And yet many who've grown up in church are so familiar with some parts of the gospel, they've stopped listening to it. Even though some could repeat the Sunday school definition, gospel means good news. Most will struggle to articulate what that good news actually is. Since the gospel is the heartbeat of this entire book, it's important for us to begin by getting clear on what the gospel really is. Getting clear on the gospel. The gospel isn't a good idea or a mystery that we need to unlock. The gospel is a person, Jesus Christ. He is the good news of great joy for all people that the angels declared when they announced his birth. Luke chapter 2, verse 10. The gospel is good news because it's a celebration of who Jesus is and what he has done to save sinners and adopt them as children of God through the power of the Holy Spirit. In this sense, the gospel isn't merely news to tell, it's an invitation. Here's who God is and what he's done to make us his dearly loved children. If it's true, it's a message worth shouting from the rooftops. It's impossible to receive the gospel in faith without believing in these key components: Jesus' sinless life, atoning death, and victorious resurrection. Who Jesus is matters just as much as what Jesus did. Jesus lived a sinless life, died a painful death as the substitute for all of God's children, rose from the grave in victory over sin and death, and will return to complete both his judgment of sin and the salvation of his people. This is good news for every generation, and it is worthy of being proclaimed every chance we get. There are times when I've heard the gospel preached with barely any mention of Jesus. That's not the gospel, even if those sermons included gospel-sounding promises. The gospel is good news about Jesus. In many ways, Jesus actually is the gospel. The gospel is not a set of theological beliefs or a spiritual mystery that needs to be unlocked. Talking about the love and grace of God is not the same thing as believing the gospel. After all, faithful Jews and Muslims can talk about God's love. At its heart, the gospel is the proclamation that God saves sinners through Jesus Christ. It's not a new law or an update to the Ten Commandments. It's the grace of God that sinners receive by faith in who Jesus is and what Jesus has done.